Hey y'all, hey, and welcome to the Octavia Butler mixtape course. I'm Dr. Brianna Whiteside, and today we are wrapping up the Patternmaster series. Can y'all go ahead and start liking this video? Tap the screen so that we can get these hearts up. And also, if you want to join the panel to chat about the last book of the Patternmaster series, this is your moment. Tap the two little people at the bottom, and then we can get on into it. I'm a little tired today, y'all, so excuse my energy. A few announcements that I do want to make. If you haven't looked on the Substack yet, you will see that I did drop part 2 of the syllabus. So we are going into the parable series. We're just not going into it how we decided last week. I did realize that I'm a little more tired than what I realized I was. And so I don't want to jump into that series. It's a tough series. So when you get an opportunity, please go ahead and look at the Substack. So ultimately what I changed was, instead of us coming back with the parable series, reading the whole parable of the sower, after we take our break, we're going to take a break next week, and then we're going to, this light is too harsh, then we're going to come back in but only read part 1 of parable of the sower. Does that make sense? So if you look on the Substack, you'll see that there is a new syllabus. Okay, and it's specifically the parable syllabus. All right, so just as a reminder, there's no class next week, but when we come back on the 30th, we are reading the first part of parable of the sower, so complete chapter 14. Okay, in the meantime, in between time, I will be dropping all of the the normal writings that I do leading up to a discussion. I will be doing that to kind of start ushering us into that series. So hide your kids, hide your wife, clutch your pearls. We will be talking about the parable series. I'm trying to mentally prepare for that. Another thing I wanted to bring up off the top of my head, I know last week we were like I think someone mentioned that the parable series was more about class than cast. I don't remember who made that comment, but as I was looking back over the series, it's both, right? It's not just, not the series, the book. It's not just class. It is cast because there's a caste system within the pattern, right? And so while there may be class systems with like journeymen or mutes and things like that, there is a caste system between the patternnists themselves based on psionic ability. And so I wanted to say that. There was one more thing I needed to say to y'all, but I cannot remember what that one thing is. I'm looking at my notes here from when I was writing my academic book on Butler. One thing I want to remind all of us, I know y'all gonna get up here and say what you like, what you didn't like, all the things, totally fine. But one thing that I do want to remind us is that this series that we just read covered 4 centuries. We literally went from 1680 to beyond 2023, right? And I think that when we're thinking about the span that Butler carried or covered, there will be moments where everything does not fit perfectly. There will be moments where you may have felt like she could have done better, and I'm with you on all of that. I just think that I want us to remain I guess grounded in a way, right? Or just be fair, because no writer to date has covered such an amount of time, right? And so she didn't do it perfectly, of course. Also remember, she's writing this in the 70s, majority of it in the 70s. So if nothing else, I want us to remember that even memory becomes faulty and disjointed as we look to the past, or even as we look to the future and things like that. So let's just keep that in mind, y'all. I want us to be fair, and I want us to be try to be constructive in our feedback, especially as we move into the parable series. That's going to be so necessary because it is such a a heavy series, to be honest. But I want us to try to be more constructive in our feedback and not, just say I like it, I didn't like it. Now we can do that in the chat though. On the chat on the Substack, let it rip. But when we're up here and then we have our peers watching it back on YouTube, because y'all know I upload this on YouTube, and so that's where it's going to live. If you're not following the Octavia Butler mixtape course, you do want to follow that on YouTube. I've noticed like just some of the comments and some of the emails people are sending, they're feeling disconnected because I guess we're spending a lot of time on, I didn't like this person, I didn't like that. You know what I'm saying? And majority of that is on me. The onus is on me because I have to do a better job at directing the conversation. So as we move into the next series, I just want to remind us of those things. Okay, y'all have made it through 5 books. Wait, is that 5? Wild Seed, Mind of My Mind, Clay's Survivor, Clay's Arc, Patternmaster. You've read 5 books in the Patternmaster series. 5 books. This is the 6th book of the course. Let me know where y'all at. Where y'all at? How are we feeling? Have y'all spent as much time in the author's head in this amount of time as we have? Like, I want to hear your thoughts. Panel and in the chat.
Hi, everybody.
Hey.
I was reflecting on this book, but also the whole series, and I wasn't able to make it last week, so I watched the recording of it. And one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is the idea of the hopelessness in this series and how many people have commented on like there is no hope for the future in this. And I feel like a lot of people, and I'm not just talking about like people in this class, but when people talk about Octavia Butler's work, that they tried to put her in this like Afrofuturist framework and lens. And I actually think that like her work is closer to Afro pessimism because, and especially this series, because there is so much violence in it, and violence that is written to be necessary. And that is like one of the that is a part of Afro pessimism, that like violence, there's always going to be violence rooted in anti-blackness. And I feel like I have seen that in this world, in the Patternist world. But also that, oh my God, wait, I just lost that train of thought. I feel like, people also, when they talk about Butler, talk about, oh my gosh, she like, was able to predict the future. But I think that we have seen like from some of her works and, people who study her, who say that like, it's not that she saw the future, it's that she deeply studied the past, and like things have not changed that much. And I remember last week somebody saying like this in the series, it, is spanning so much time, and from like the Patternmaster after Clay's arc is like a couple hundred years, I think. And how like something should have changed. But if we look at our world today, and like would people from a couple hundred years ago look at what's happening, particularly in the US, and be like, wow, so much has changed? Like they would not say that. They would not say that, because we can recognize, slavery just like in our system now with the prison industrial complex, but also with how we treat migrants in this country. So I feel like maybe it is hard to see the hope in it because we are living a repetition of the past. And so like I'm trying to like change my framework, my thinking, to be like, well, I don't want us to keep going in this direction, so what do I have to do to like break the cycle? And so I hope that that is maybe a piece of hope that other people can hold on to as well.
Yeah, I like that you brought that up. I was thinking about that because when I first encountered the Pattern series, I'm like, this is full of hope, this is full of healing, and you do have to look for what you want to see is what you're going to see. So me coming to a text looking at it from a healing perspective, I see healing all throughout the narratives. Now there may be in small quantities, or they may not be as pronounced as the negativity of the text, but they're there, and that's just society, in general, that the negative will be pushed to the top more than the positive. But I think also one thing that we just have to remember, that Butler has been clear in her interviews that she does not create weak protagonists or weak Black women characters. And even though, we may not like what they go through, she is adamant that they're not weak and they're not powerless. So I think sometimes we just have to push a little bit further, because we have to but in my mind, Butler is not spoon feeding anyone. We have to come to the table and figure this stuff out. And so, to your point, it is a reflection of humanity, and I wonder if our rejection of her violence or things like that she's pointing out about humanity is that, to your point, that we wish that we would have been further, right? And it reminds me of Teaching in Prison, Teaching Native Son, which is a hard book to teach anyway, and the inmates were rejecting Bigger, whose name is shortened for Bad, Nigger. But they were rejecting his character, and I couldn't figure out why. Like, why are you all so, against this character? And then, someone said, because if he could have evolved, that would have meant that there was some hope for us, but he never evolved. And so they were pushing back against Bigger because Bigger did not represent hope for themselves. And so that's what that just made me think about. I have never studied Afro-pessimism, but I'm pretty sure it's just the opposite coin of Afrofuturism. And so I can see that it could probably fit in that study. All right.
When I first, when I would say this, like when I,
All right.
when I first, when I would say this, like when I first, because I first read Butler like in the 80s. And like late 70s, early 80s is when I first started reading her. And the thing I can remember, I distinctly remember this, is that I was shocked that the main characters were Black females. I
Yeah.
was shocked because we're talking about, even with, I think the first one I ever read was Kindred, and then maybe I made like Wild Seed or something. I can't remember which was the first two I read. But that always struck me as like something I had never seen. Number one, Black women didn't write science fiction. Number two, Black women were never in a position where they had to make critically hard choices around the world, like what's happening with the world. It wasn't just, am I going to have this man's baby, which is what people wrote about, or am I going to get beat up, or am I going to get left, or if I'm trying to corporate ladder or some relationship stuff. Like, this was the first time I ever read a Black woman who was the protagonist in any of the books where she's doing this extraordinary stuff.
Yeah.
Like, she's put in these extraordinary positions, and she's the one that is going through. We see it from her point of view. We understand it from her point of view. And so that was the hope for me. It wasn't so much the story itself. It was the fact that she had positioned Black women in a role that people didn't see her in. Like, she was, in most cases, she was the leader. She was the one who was pressing back. She was the one who was trying to, from freedom to doing whatever it was. So it's hard to read, and I still have a hard time reading parables because it's just like raw. And and I told you last week, I started reading that already, and I'm already like 20 pages in, and I'm like, okay, I got to stop and read some fun light stuff because I don't know, and come back or whatever. But I just wanted to say that I think one of the things that happens with Butler without the discussion is that we don't think about Butler at the time that she was writing and what was available around the world. I mean, Star Trek, even though you're not a Star Trek person, had just came out. And that was the first time we saw Black women in the future. Like, literally, there were no Black people in the future.
Yeah.
There were no Black people in the future. You didn't have like this Afrofuturism. That's the new, it's in terms of like it becoming in popular context. It may be not new in terms of academia, but in popular context, that's brand new.
Yeah. 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 And
I
even before you go, Ebony or Erica?
Ebony.
Ebony, before you go, Ebony, I just want to follow up to what Tina was saying because as I was preparing to come up here, I was looking at like this is literally the outline of my academic book, y'all, and I was looking at like the healing elements of it, and I'm just gonna give y'all this just in case I do finish writing a book, but. Chapter 2 looked at enslavement and Black women healers, and I was looking at the Patternmaster series and Kindred. Chapter 3, I was looking at literacy as healing, Mind of My Mind and Fledgling. Chapter 4, Black women's activism in relation to healing, the whole Parable series. Chapter 5, Afronauts, Space and Technology, that's Survivor, Dawn, and Adulthood Rights. And then Black women and artificial intelligence, that is Butler's Imago and her experimentation. Like when I'm looking back at this book, I'm literally saying these notes. I literally was on the healing pulse, right? And it took me a little time to kind of figure out where those healing properties are, where the hopeful things are. But to your point, Tina, we do have to consider when she was writing. We do. But also take into consideration why we may be having these visceral responses to her work. Is it because we're in this present moment, right? Prepare yourselves for Parable of the Talents. It's not even Parable of the Swords, it's Talents for me. Let's just stop there. Ebony, sorry. Which one was it?
Ebony.
Ebony, go ahead. Hey.
Hi. I'd like to say that I loved the book, and I agree with what the panelists have said already. The book, like you said last week, it reminded you of Game of Thrones. It kind of reminded me of the show The Last Kingdom on Netflix. I don't know if anybody's ever seen that, or any type of like medieval era fiction. Um, the second half just continued to show like humans' hierarchical nature. And I think Octavia is suggesting that with the fall of society, that humans tend to turn back to their animalistic behaviors.
We do.
And I just love how all her books kind of dive into human behavior at its most basic level. Even when we're talking about all her books and we talk about how she is a student of history, but I also see a line could be drawn that she is a student of sociology because of how she kind of um, discusses the thought pattern and societal systems of groups of people. And I feel like this book kind of delved or dived into patriarchy with the competition of the two sons to succeed their father's quote unquote throne.
Yeah.
And I also just want to add in there that I love Amber's character, and I feel like Teray would not have succeeded without her. Even just her presence and her decision to have that child with him kind of gave him the courage and strength that he needed to defeat currency.
Yeah, when we get to the discussion, I do want to talk about Amber. I do want to open the floor up for her because we really haven't talked about her much. And one thing I do want to tell people, I wrote extensively on the Substack for the paid subscribers on this one, but I do want to say like Amber's gender fluidity kind of mirrored Butler's at the time and her experimentation of same gender loving. And for Butler in her notes, what she was really writing about, she was lonely and, she wanted companionship, but aesthetically, she didn't feel like she was aesthetically pleasing. And then, you have this whole debacle with her editor who did those heavy edits of Survivor. And I don't really know if he rejected her or not, just nothing became of that. So then Butler tries to see if, okay, well, maybe I am not heterosexual, maybe I should try a homosexual relationship. And, she does try that relationship, but then she realizes like, no, that's not really what's for me. That's not what I am searching for. And so that was an example of Butler, continuing to write her own struggles and herself into the narrative, because each protagonist we have encountered in this series has represented her or reflected some part of her life in some type of way. But I did want to say that because we do have this, sexually fluid character who is not afraid about it. And I think that was kind of, different for the time. This is 1976. This is published. So you have this woman, arguably a feminist in that way, right? And Butler taking this wild jump out there to say, I don't care what y'all saying, this is okay. Sir Maxwell said, I was shocked. Maisha, what you got?
I'll say that
You muffled for some reason.
can you hear me now?
Okay, good.
I'll say that overall, I really enjoyed the series, especially Wild Seed and Survivor, my two favorite books. And the characters in the books, and for me to be reading the series a second time, almost more than 20 years later, it was a different series for me. This wasn't my favorite book, but I'm gonna take a page from Black Stoop Kid's book and I'm gonna look at it through a different lens. I think what I didn't like about it was that we were so far in the future and we had experienced evolution, but yet we were still holding on to the same systems. And that's what really bothered me. But I love how Ebony pointed out that it was like The Last Kingdom, which I did watch. And now I'm thinking that the main character was like King Arthur, right? I don't want to rule, but I'm being pushed in a direction to rule. And I never thought of it from that perspective, and now it makes me think of the book in a different way. I kind of like it a little bit more than I did 5 minutes ago. But I will say that for me, I think that Butler really, if I look at it from a different lens, I think she's really showing us that we can continue to evolve as a human species, but if we don't change our systems, if we don't change the way we do things, we are bound to keep repeating the same mistakes even as we evolve, right? Because that's what I'm seeing, right? I think for me, I always kept saying I don't see the hope, but now that I'm thinking about it, maybe this was her way of warning us.
Yeah.
Right.
And it was, right? Before we get to the parables where people claim that she was prophetic, and she clearly says in interviews, and I'm going to start dropping those interviews, this was not prophecy at all. These were warnings, right? And, to your point, remember the human contradiction that I keep bringing up when Butler's like, intelligence and hierarchy cannot coexist in humans. And because intelligence is relatively new, humans are always going to default to hierarchy. You're always going to do it. So your intelligence doesn't matter. And I think that's probably some of your frustration with the pattern is like, you all have a hive mind now. And you have access to so much information, and you should have been a little bit further, but you're not. Why? Because they were hyper focused on hierarchy.
Right. So humans default to hierarchy because that's how we quote unquote created civilizations, because hierarchy is one of the 8 elements of being classified as a civilization. But in my mind, as someone who studied history, like I feel like if we're hundreds of years in the future, we should have been beyond that, right? We should have been beyond those systems because we're evolving. So to see a group of people evolve mentally and with the help of aliens and just still perpetuate the same systems lets me know that we are not as evolved as we think we should be or are, because even though we progress, we still stay the same. And I think that was her warning. Like it's not about evolving on a cellular level or a mental level. It's about taking that evolution to the next step and evolving the way we think and do things to progress as a human species. So, yeah.
I like that. And I think that the more we speak about this, I keep thinking about if this is the warning, then parable is the result. You didn't heed the warnings of the Patternmaster universe. Now you're about to feel the consequences in parables, right? In the parable series. Because we do get a different reality, and we do, as we begin to read through these, different characters, of course, different setting, but a continuation of the series itself. We do tackle those hardships. So what you don't hear, you're going to feel,
You're
And
right.
now we're about to step into the world of feeling. You know, no
I
TNT because Lauren has hyper empathy.
I'm not gonna say too much, but I read Parable again in January when you were posting on TikTok and you inspired me to jump back in. And so I agree. So when we discuss it in the next couple of weeks, it's gonna be interesting how it parallels what's going on right now.
I don't want to read it.
Trying to
Let me
connect her
go ahead, Ebony.
trying to connect her different series between the Patternist, and we're going to Parables next, but looking even further ahead to the Exogenesis series. Part of the reasons why that happened was because they said that humans kind of destroyed ourselves because of that hierarchical mind. So I'm wondering if she's like through these books setting up, maybe that's the hope that everybody's looking for. And maybe she's showing that that hope was actual an intervention or a intervening by other worldly beings. I'm not sure. Just throwing that out there.
No, I think that that's a fair point when we finally do get to that series. And that series is Dawn, Adulthood Rights, and Imago. But of course, we kind of see today people are saying, okay, well, we just need to go colonize Mars, or we need to go to another planet, things of that nature. Like we have so ruined Earth, right? Now we have to go to another place. And also remember, I don't think Butler says this in Dawn. It's been a few years since I've read it, but I keep remembering the fire next time. So number one, we can think about this in the biblical sense where God says, I'm not going to destroy the world by a flood again. The next time is going to be by fire. And if we take that, and as we're going into the parables, which is both hard, but also in a sense, it has religious undertones. The world is heating up. We are in the middle of a what the climate change, right? By the time we get to dawn, there has been a war, and the earth has increased its heat. And so it's unlivable. It's unlivable. The Oankali are literally trying to scorch the entire earth to make it inhabitable for humans again later on, when they're ready, or when they know that they're not going to destroy it again. And so I think if we're thinking ahead with the biblical references, y'all know Butler. This is the series where Butler actually begins to work out her religious tensions. This is actually the fire next time we're about to deal with.
So I met Butler 3 times. And I think that, and I looked at some of my notes when I wrote, because I was like fangirling like you would not believe. And so one of the things in the book reading that she was there, somebody asked her about, centering Black women or centering this scenario. And what she said was that, and a lot of times, I wrote this down, like in from her perspective, Black women tend to be not perceived as the ideal human. Like, you're not the ideal human. So I'm going to put you in extraordinary circumstances and let you act like an ordinary human. So like her, like, we see again where we are right now, we see the failings, we don't necessarily see some of the hope or the, like, she doesn't come off like her protagonists. They don't come off as superheroes. Do you know what I mean? They come off as humans, and they're making mistakes, or they're accepting, or they're going along with it. And I remember, and I wrote in my little diary, this was profound to me, to say black women equal human. And that's what I wrote, Black women equal human. Just
Wow.
that little thing. So for me, when I think about it, it was, again, she would say this, and I know you've seen this, where she'll say, I never saw myself in the future. I never saw us being this way or whatever else. So I just thought that was interesting, because she could have definitely made all of her protagonists these super bad Harriet Tubman in our minds, kind of like women who just like did all of this stuff. And she did to a certain extent, but she made them the positives and the negative human.
That's heavy.
I mean, that's what she was. So, like I said, that was One of the 3 times, and I looked at my little journal thing I used to keep back in the day, and I'm like, dang, okay,
Right. Wow. I'm glad. I'm jelly you got to meet her.
yeah.
But thank you for sharing that with us. Ebony, what you got?
I just want to say that I loved your article that you posted on Substack about the Afronaut and the importance of her publishing Survivor so that we could see that Black female in the future.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I worked really hard on that. Y'all, the academic gatekeeping to get that article pushed through by other Butler fans in academia, it was so hard because they were telling me, absolutely not, you're wrong. And I'm like, how you gonna tell me I'm wrong? You know what I'm saying? If I'm supporting it, it was tough to get that article through. It was 2 years of gatekeeping. But I finally got it through, and it was my last article that came out as an academic, as a traditional academic. So thank you so much for saying that. Christy.
Okay. Hi. I think what made me join was something I kind of wanted to add to that when we're talking about Survivor. And I know you had written the order in which we should have read them. And you're like, well, I was a little off on that. I think that Survivor could go in many places, even the end.
Okay. Yeah.
Just because I see Wild Seed and Mind of My Mind, they kind of flow together.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe with a little bit more work back then, Clay's arc could have flowed into that. Patternmaster shows the Clay arcs and the Patternist coming together,
Mm-hmm.
but then that leaves Survivor. Like, what was that? So I could almost see reading that as the ending of the Mutes and anybody, because I believe Survivor talked about, oh, the word, wildlings. Am I right about that?
The wild humans in the outside of society.
Yes, yes. So I could kind of see Survivor leading into that and that giving more hope potentially because people have left this warring world
Mm-hmm.
and Alana is the survivor that kind of she's the sole survivor of all of the mess that has been made.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to your point, to give people more context of what Christy's saying, well, I don't know when this was, maybe last week on the 9th, I think, I posted in Substack and said, I found this in a Butler interview from 1998, and she says, Mind in My Mind takes place in the present, Survivor takes place in the near future, Patternmaster takes place in the distant future. So with that in mind, according to Butler's logic, we should have read Survivor after Clay's arc and before Patternmaster, just based on how she set it up. But I do think it could have worked that way. I think I guess it wouldn't, because when I'm thinking about how these books are set up in the Seed to Harvest compilation, there is a hard shift from Mind of My Mind to Clay's arc. And I don't know if some type of prologue would have been helpful to kind of bridge that, especially if you just have one book and not individual books like a lot of people have right now. I don't know, but there was a hard shift. But I do think if Butler had a little more time and just had organized her notes a little better, she could have fleshed that out more. But then I also wonder, yeah, she could have fleshed that out more, because some of the things that would have tripped her up is her saying that in Survivor, it was Mary that allowed them to go off into space. But, at this point, we're dealing with Raelle. So we know that Mary is long gone. And then we know her son should have been the heir apparent. But we don't know what went on if she had more children. So I think that if she was more organized in her notes, because her archive is the largest archive by a Black writer at the Huntington. She could have probably pulled it off, and even let us go back into reprinting with the text. So I agree with you there.
Maybe a bit more organized, but at the same time, props for her for writing backwards.
Absolutely. Like
So
everybody, I did see in the chat when they were like this writing was not the best. You can tell that this is, her first book, but as you can see, she wrote backwards from this one world. That speaks to something. And she was dyslexic, right? Yeah, I agree. She's a star. Okay. All right. Does anyone else want to say anything? How we feel about Amber?
I liked Amber. I thought she was a great character, and when she revealed that she got into conflict because of who she fell in love with, I really didn't even pay much attention to it. I was just like, okay, and I kept going. So when you brought it up now, I was like, oh yeah, that is a big deal. But again, 2025 versus
Yeah.
1980 something,
Where are you from?
New York City.
I heard it. I heard it. I was like, okay. Yes, right. Where she was writing through that time. We like Amber. I think it was something that you said that I wanted to. Oh, did y'all catch the reference when Amber was able to shed her hand? That is exactly what Stefan was able to do in Wild Seed. Like that was like a cast back. Y'all remember? Y'all know who Stefan was, right? The one that got unalived by the telepath that no one knew he went through transition. Like, did y'all catch that reference? That in Wild Tea, Anyanwu was saying he can grow a new limb. It'll just take him some time. But then we have Amber growing the new hand right in front of Teray. I found that fascinating. There was also a cast back when Amber's thought she was reflecting back to when Doro was unalived by Mary. So that was a cast back to Mind of My Mind. Did y'all catch those moments? They were brief passing mentions.
I did.
I did. I felt like Amber was like the representation, or she showed a lot of personality or descriptions of Anyanwu. Like she was the new recreation of her, just by her incredible strength and her ability to heal. It was like she wasn't the strongest. She wasn't able to be the strongest in the story, but she was a very strong female character, even to the point of where you said she could heal herself and rebuild a limb in that way, but also you said she could heal herself and rebuild a limb in that way, but also pick and choose when she wanted to procreate.
And remember, Anyanwu, she turned her reproductive system off when Doro took Thomas from her. She literally said that she was carrying and then she turned it off, right? So she can decide when she wanted to have kids too. All right.
Is Amber and I'm sorry, I can't. And y'all, is that where she comes from, Amber? Since Patternmaster was the first written, and she's writing backwards. Is that where she comes from?
Yeah, I think that's her lineage, right? I think that Amber, Rachel from Mind of My Mind. Was that Rachel? Black lady, Black woman, congregation healer. I think that's who it was.
Yes, it was Rachel.
Okay. Amber, Rachel, Anyanwu, like these are direct healers. So we're seeing the Black women are the healers, right? So yes, I think that is her line in the pattern for sure. Because Rachel was one of the first family members, so that would mean that she needed a direct lineage, just like Lero. Did y'all catch? And that was last week. But Lero, who could read the images, was directly from Jan's strand of the pattern, because Jan was not a strong patternist, but she could lift print memories off of objects. So their lineages are carrying through Patternmaster, right? And I think that also just solidifies Butler's intentionality and her eye to the detail. Like, they're showing up, their descendants are still showing up, they're just not as pronounced as they were in other books.
It's also the idea that she was able that it's almost like with Doro and Anyayu, I can never pronounce that.
Anyawu.
Anyawu, thank you. That you can see them, like the Tirade people, like just how cold they were. You know, his brother and his father, and like how they were just matter of fact. I mean, that was Doro printed like 100,000 times. I'm sorry, I'm still gonna be on Doro train. And then the whole and then the same thing again with her in terms of the healing and how she was. The other thing that stood out to me was that she was independent, and she was like, I don't have to be here. I don't know. I know that I'm independent. They had to acknowledge that she was independent. And their whole thing was trying to, you know, even Tyrell, he was trying to trap her, like, no, you need to be with me or whatever. She's like, I'm still independent.
Or be
So
my first husband, not my first. I ain't gonna be your first wife.
That's right. Like, she like, whatever. Like, I'm not that person. So I found that to be a really good drawback to the, you know, to the original.
Yeah, 100%. Yes, and to have written this during is this second wave feminism, I think, to have these strong women characters, and she's writing right before, as the Black women's renaissance of the 1980s is taking off, right? This is where all of your favorite Black women writers, Alice Walker, Toni Morrison, I'm drawing a blank of the other authors, but all of the Black women were ramping up to start this renaissance in the 80s. And Butler though she was not part of the conversation, and some of her notes reveal that she was trying to become part of, yes, Valerie, I always forget how to say that, River Collective. But though she was writing at the same time, she was not part of the crowd, right? And her notes revealed that she was trying to become a voice during the Renaissance, but she was kind of shunned because she was writing what some people would say that weird stuff, right? She was the first Black woman writer writing science fiction, and so she wasn't in the genre, but she was very much an important voice, as we can see. And in her interview, when someone asks, you know, what good is science fiction to Black people, it gets you off the beaten path of what's already been done, right? And I don't think Black women writers then were ready to push the envelope so far in advance like Butler was trying to do, because they were still working against a lot of caricatures and demeaning voices that were prevalent about Black women during that time. So yeah, I just wanted to say that. Anybody else? Somebody said that.
It's interesting that you say that, because my copy of the Patternmaster, kind of the excerpt from the Oprah magazine, says that if we're talking about must-read authors like Maya Angelou, James Baldwin, and Toni Morrison, you have to add Octavia Butler in that conversation. So Oprah kind of retrospectively gives her that credit that maybe she didn't get at the time.
Oh, that's good. I haven't seen I have not seen the newer copies of these books. But yeah, absolutely, because she was left out of the conversation. And even in some of her writings, like, they knew who she was. She was corresponding with them. She was also asking to be a part of certain anthologies, because, you know, if you get anthologized, you become part of the canon. A lot of Butler's works were not anthologized, and she was not therefore part of the African American literary canon, hence why so many people did not know about her works like we know about other Black women writers' works, because they're not part of these big, thick books of African American literature. Which is problematic, because so many people come to her works late. Like, I think she's had a renaissance once, and she's having another renaissance again. But she should have been further along. Like, she should have gotten her flowers when she was still alive. as opposed to, now that she's getting them. But they knew about her. They just kind of shunned her. I think that's shady. That's all I'm saying. I think that's pretty shady.
I'll say I agree because I mean, if you just look at her female characters in of itself, they were great to read. As for me, discovering her at 14 in the library, um,
Wow.
after reading The Giver and say, "Oh, I really like The Giver. Let me find something that's sci-fi," and picking up Dawn and discovering Lilith was like wonderful for me, and it opened my eyes and thrust me into this science fiction world. As I continued to become an avid reader as I grew up. I when she passed, I remember exactly where I was. I was in the Africana Studies office in Brooklyn College. She passed, and I was sad because I loved her books, and I said I'm going to stop reading her books because she can write a lot, and I got my whole lifetime to finish her books. And now that I'm in my 40s, and then you came on TikTok and you reintroduced her to us, and I'm like, all right, this is my moment to finish reading her books and to discuss them with people who liked her. So I wish she would have known the impact more, been alive to see the impact her books had specifically on young Black children who like science fiction and adults.
And
So
those of us who didn't think we liked science fiction and then end up liking science fiction, like me, right? But yeah, she didn't get her flowers in life, and that is the tragedy.
So one of the things that might have contributed to this is that when Dawn, the first edition of Dawn, when it first came out, the cover was a white woman pulling back pulling back some of the information. So the earliest covers that she had didn't depict her, or they hid the fact that she was Black.
Oh, I got it. Yeah, I've seen this cover, and I'm gonna put it up to. Let me put it up to the screen so you all can see this. It's actually on Amazon. Hold on, y'all. I ain't trying to tear my stuff up over here, trying to flip the screen around. All right. Okay. Can y'all see that?
Yep.
That's what it looked like. But it also reminds you of kind of like, I don't know if you all saw when I was doing the covers of Mind of My Mind, right? They had to whitewash her.
Yes.
Because science fiction was white male dominant. So that is true, but I think Butler also knew her audience. She said that they were Black women, gay men, and I forget the third group, science fiction lovers. Those were her audiences. Black women, gay men, science fiction lovers. But to your point, print culture matters. So if you were saying, "Oh, this is Dawn," and Lilith is nowhere near, she's descendant of Yoruba. She's African, if I'm not mistaken, or her husband is African. We'll get to it when we get to it. But these characters are not fair-skinned characters.
So so for me, when I was, because I've always been a science fiction kind of fantasy person. So I remember when I first went to Third World Press and I was looking for science fiction books, the guy handed me Dawn, and I'm like, what is this? And he was like, "Trust me, sister, this is African American author. You will really like her." I think this was the first book I read. I think that's what it was.
Okay.
I can remember that, have that memory. But if you are at the time when this was, again, like I said, in the 80s, early 80s, when this was happening, there were all of these Black women writers that were coming out. And it was, there was a point in the late 80s and 90s when it was all relationships. Every book was for women, and then 4 different relationships that was going on or whatever else. It was just a lot of books like that, a lot of relationship books. And so I just remember thinking, she's never going to find an audience because the way that the publisher is presenting her. Because so there are other women who like fantasy or sci-fi, which I hid that I liked it. In my weird bag that I was into this. I don't see how you would found each other, like how you would know that she was out there, that she was this amazing author or whatever else. Like I always thought it was too far, and that people wouldn't, if they said they didn't like sci-fi, they were not going to float towards her.
But I'm also thinking about print culture today, right? And I'm looking at, some of the covers don't even depict human elements. Like if I'm about to hold Dawn up to you right now, there is no image. Hold on. There's no image. You don't even really know what it is. So there's still like this erasure that's still happening.
Yep.
Right? That makes no sense. None. Right? So we boomerang the scene from let's whitewash this to let's just neutralize Butler's work altogether because we do not even want to hint that this is about Black folks.
Right.
I just want
That
to
was
say that I loved your article on the different prints and the different things of not just Mind of My Mind, but I've noticed that it happened to a lot of her books. Some of her books, even for this class, I bought off of Amazon, so they're new. So they're the mainstream mass print covers. But if you go on different sites like thrift books, and people have old copies that they're selling, you can see all the different covers that she has. Like my cover of Dawn, I don't have the whole series together. I have the individual books. My cover of Dawn is completely different than the one that you just showed. It does have a Black woman on my cover.
Okay. What about Patternmaster? Is it purple?
Yes, mine is purple.
Okay. Because even this is one of the first, and this is the first edition of Patternmaster. If I can show y'all. Oh.
Yep.
That's the first edition of Patternmaster, right? And then let me show you another edition of it because then it gets into science fiction-y a little bit, but then it completely just kind of falls off. Y'all see that? That looks like action figures and a mind and all this other stuff. And then we start to move. I know in the like 2000 and let's see, Goodreads has this one. And I have seen this one before. Oh, come on, y'all. Why are we trying to talk about print culture? Okay.
Yeah, I think that's the cover that I had when I got my hands on her book. Because I think for a hot minute, her books were out of print.
Yep.
And I couldn't get my hands on the Patternmaster series, and I wanted to read the whole thing. So I had to like buy them old online. So I think that was the one I had.
But even look at this one. Like they're switching it up. Like they're really switching it up, trying to figure out. And this man looks Indian. Anyway, they're trying to market her, and I think for a while she wasn't even in bookstores. And this is like Barnes and Noble. She was not in the Black author section.
No, she never was. You always have to find her. She was never in the Black author section unless you went to a Black bookstore.
Yep. So it's tricky. It's tricky work. But I don't really know what to make of that. But here we are. We are finding her again, and I am happy about that part. Okay. We got like 30 minutes. Where would you all like to go? Or we can go to the questions that I have. Anybody want to share any more thoughts before I pull up these questions? Where is the questions? Okay. All right.
I think I do have one more thing about Amber. Is she the first character that we've seen that hasn't been beaten or hit?
She did get hit. She got hit.
Did she?
Yeah.
I think she was slapped.
Yeah, she was slapped. Yeah.
I think she was slapped.
Yeah, she was slapped.
Okay. My bad.
Yeah. And she kind of threatened him, like, you do that one more time, and I'm gonna mess your organs up, basically.
Oh, yep. You're right. You're right.
Yeah, because you can't let her be too independent, right? There's always a system or someone to try to bring you back down in that way. So yeah, she was hit. I feel like everyone in this series was hit. Am I lying? Every Black woman, at least.
Yes.
Okay.
That's what I think. That's why I was like, is she the first one that
No.
hasn't been abused in some way? Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. It would have been nice to not. And you know, y'all want to know what's funny? I did not, until I'm reading this with you all, I did not pick up those elements of violence. That kind of just shows how desensitized I've been reading these works, right? It never mattered. Thank y'all for the hearts, whoever getting it. Thank you. I mean, for the roses. I don't know. It didn't dawn on me until you all started to say, these are very violent texts. And I'm like, are they? I guess they are, you know, but we live in a violent world. You know what I'm saying? So it just really didn't faze me. Just like the parables didn't faze me, and they phasing me already. Okay. All right. So let's get into Patternmaster. And for the people who just hopped on, let me just do a quick reset. We're wrapping up Butler's Patternmaster series, which is her first series, her most understudied and underread series. And I did say that next week we are taking a break from the course, right? But when we come back, we're going to come back reading the parable series. So rather than come back and discuss the entire parable series, we're going to come back and discuss part 1 of the parable, a parable of the sower. And you can find that breakdown on the Substack. I just posted it today, but for April 30th, read up to page 166 or read chapter 14. Read up to complete chapter 14. So I just wanted to do a quick reset and remind people of those quick things, and let people know if they want to come on and get this leg of the course, the parable leg of the course, come on and hop on in. We just continuing on. All right. Any questions so far? Okay, no, okay. All right, let's see where we should go. I only did 5 questions this time. Let's do the art and politics of signifying. It says, this is number 3 if you're following along on the Substack. It says, signifying, a rhetorical strategy rooted in African-American literary tradition, privileges cultural fluency, subtlety, and subversion. In what ways does Butler signify on herself in Patternmaster and across the Patternmaster series? How does recognizing these moments elevate your understanding of the text's themes and layered conversations with race, authorship, and genre? Do y'all know what signifying is? Because I can explain it. It's kind of, well, let me see if y'all know before I jump into it.
Playing the dozens.
Yeah, literally is. Thank you. So that is the cultural way to understand it. You plan the dozens. It is literally kind of in this vein of call and response. So generally in African American literary tradition, you will have one text issue a call, and then you'll have another text issue a response, right? Another author issue a response or a follow-up to this author. So you can think about this in terms of Richard Wright's Black Boy and Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, if you know what those two authors, right? So one is issuing a call saying this is a problem. Another one is following up saying, yes, I am acknowledging this is a problem. Let me further this conversation in this way. So according to, and I'm going to give you the definition by Henry Louis Gates Jr., he says that it is a form of rhetorical play, which is an indirect, witty, or often ironic way of saying one thing while meaning another. It's a hallmark of African-American literary tradition that uses double meanings, cultural codes, and shared understanding to communicate deeper truths. In short, it's how Black writers talk back to the past, to power, or even themselves with style, critique, and layered meaning. So generally when we're thinking about signifying, it's like this author signifying on this author signifying on this author. But in Butler's universe, she's not signifying on anybody. She's signifying on herself. And I'm wondering whether in Patternmaster or in the entire Patternmaster series as a whole, if you can, comment on the ways in which Butler signifying has kind of elevated your understanding of, the text or even the series themes, conversations with race or genre. Is that too complicated of a question? Should I pregnancy.
I think that one of the ways that she signified in this whole series was around the privilege that being male brings,
Okay.
because I kept seeing that concept over and over again about how they're the leader, and like just the way that they, like, there was no thought about the women, like, your role is to serve me, you're going to serve me no matter what, I don't care what you think about from an independent standpoint. Even through all of this stuff, we just got finished talking about Amber being independent, but that struggle between her being able to assert her independence, and
Mm-hmm.
then the men in her life who surrounded her who felt like she needed to submit or be under their control, that just kept coming up. It's a reoccurring theme, and how different women, they keep going back and forth with it, back and forth. Like, how am I going to get control? How am I going to do this? Like, what is that? So for me, that was one of the things that I thought, from a call and response standpoint, that was like, she was, I'm in charge of you. That was very strong for me.
Yeah. So like her confrontation with like patriarchy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just kept coming it just kept coming up as, here's a central theme, and then how do you address it? And no matter the way it took on, whether it was Mary, the way she dealt with it, or the way others dealt with it, it just kept coming up. The woman who was in Survivor, even in that one, it's still the same thing. Everybody has a place for you, and you have to survive in that. And then I think the other part of that, the flip side of that, is that women found ways. You got me in this box, but I'm gonna find a way.
Want to piggyback off of that about Amber specifically, because I keep thinking how she represents the roles Black women have played historically in the United States of America, especially under the system of enslavement, and how she is independent, but she's existing within the group and outside the group, right? She is playing a role depending on where she is needed within the hierarchy,
Yeah.
right? So we know that, at least I learned that, and I'm just say I learned in college that Black women in the hierarchy of enslavement were above at times their mistresses because of the role that they played in that hierarchical system. And so Amber represents that. She represents how Black women play these multiple roles and try to assert their independence, but they also are being used at specific times to garner somebody else's power. If that, I don't know if I'm making sense, but
Yeah. So,
Further to that,
go ahead.
adding further to that, and we're talking about Amber, but the other woman in this story, E-Ray, who was originally Teray's wife, and how she had to find her way in this patriarchal system, and how she had to kind of, deal with the cards that were given to her, and she picked whichever side she thought was the most powerful to succeed. And talking about Amber, we should also talk about E-Ray as well.
And that's true because she ultimately decided, hey, there was a time where I would have followed you, right? Yes, there was a time where I did want to be with you, but that time has passed. Like I've had to fend for myself. Like I took your advice and I have made a decision for myself. So I forgot Ray. I did because she left us so early on in the text. What do y'all think about Ray?
I think she just, she had to kind of make a difficult choice for herself because her husband ended up making a choice for her that put her kind of in a bad spot. And so I feel like she kind of went into survival mode when she had to, like, cozy up to, how do you pronounce his name? Currency. And when Tira came back and was like, hey, I'm ready, like, let's go, she was like, oh, like, I kind of got comfortable here because I could no longer rely on you. And I think also, like, I've been thinking about how, like, for Tira being, like, with Ire, and, like, how he was not ready to step up for her.
Yeah.
But when he was with Amber, he was able to evolve into someone who was ready to fight for himself. Um and I was kind of thinking about that in the way that, like, you could be with somebody who doesn't treat you right, and then you break up, and then they go and they treat the next person like they're the best person in the world, and you're like, what is it about me that they couldn't treat me like that? But it more says something about that person, right? So it says more about T-Ray than it does about Ure, and what she was able to do. But that's kind of like, for the question about signifying, like, that's what I was thinking about, like that triangle kind of relationship. I guess it's more like a V relationship.
Yeah. To E-Ray, as you were speaking, one thing I was thinking about is like the relationship that we saw in biblical hierarchical societies or patriarchal societies, more specifically between Sarah and Abraham. And Abraham was her husband, wasn't it? I think so. But how he like went down to Egypt, and he kind of said that she convinced her to say that she was his sister. And then as a result of that, she was taken into Pharaoh's house. Right. And, so she was kind of sold into slavery so that he wouldn't get the brunt end of the blowback of having a beautiful wife. He's like, no, I'm selling you into this system to save my butt. And it's kind of like the same thing that Teray did with Ire, like, hey, I'm going to accept these controls, but as a result of me accepting these controls, now these controls are superimposed upon you, right? And I remember it was this moment where she was kind of like, no, don't do it. And he's like, I accept them, right? And so ultimately he kind of took away, or tried to take away, her autonomy and her ability to kind of make a decision for herself. He sold her into another house. And then when he wanted her to come with him, she was like, I played the role too long. Like, there was a time when I would have followed you, my husband, but ultimately my husband betrayed me and sold me to another man in a way. And I don't know if sold is the proper term that I should be using, but it feels like a selling of sorts. You know what I mean?
Yes, and it's interesting that you bring up Sarah and Abraham, because I feel like Doro's and Anyanwu's story kind of mirrors that as well.
No, it is. Yeah. I was just gonna say the thing that got me in this book that really touched me when reading this, was that she said, you didn't even think about me. Like, it was the moment of realization, like when it came time for him to consider, he had a fleeting moment of thinking about her, but not really. So if you're supposed to cover me from a biblical standpoint, you're supposed to cover me, right? So I should be your first thought. Your first thought was yourself, what you couldn't deal with. And you knew I would have no choice. Like, there isn't an option. If I tried to stand up to what was happening to me, if I tried to like not sleep with this man, if I tried not to be in some sort of submission with him, what was gonna happen to me? You didn't care. You thought about you not wanting to accept any control.
Yeah.
But you were okay with me being controlled.
Yeah.
You were completely okay with me being not just me mentally being controlled, but me physically being controlled.
Sexually as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You were okay with that. So, I thought she was really kind the way she blew him off, because it would have been a whole nother story.
Mm-hmm.
And like Tira was so young then too, because he was just right out of school, and I feel like he got tripped up in that intellectualism where he was like, "Well, y'all not playing by the rules."
I was just about to say that we see the limitations of the limitations of intellectualism, the limitations of schooling, because even when Amber was trying to teach him to heal, she's like, you're doing this too slow. I'm going to have to give you all of this information really quickly. Like, and even when Karanzi was in a duel with Karanzi where they were conversing, Karanzi was like, those learning blocks are outdated. Those models that you all are using are outdated, so they don't know any better.
Yes. And like Amber, when they go on this journey, this hero's journey kind of, it's interesting because, like, so I'm from New York City, and in Harlem, like when you don't get like a formal higher education, you say that you get your degree from the corner of like Lenox Avenue, like you got it from the street. And I feel like this, like when T-Ray goes out with Amber to go to Forsyth, that's when he gets his kind of like street education, and that is what actually helps him to survive.
Because you know that there is that divide between school education and street education. Street educated people, what no matter where you go, they're 9 times out of 10 smarter. They know how to get things done. They know how to survive. They know how to do things that people who are green, quote unquote, they don't know how to do. So your schooling only protects you as long as you're in that environment that schooling is allowed to protect you in, right? As long as you stay in the system of education, that is your only protection within that system. But the moment you step out of that system, you're in trouble. You don't know enough, right? That's why
Like Currency definitely knew that. He definitely knew that his brother, who was 10 years his senior, he was older. Currency was older, and he definitely used his youth, to raise youth to his advantage. And, the whole book, he was being a quote unquote bully and using the women, E-Ray and then Amber, as a way to further antagonize and demasculate Teray throughout the whole book.
And when I talk to my friends who are street friends, right? Those ones who ain't got nothing to lose. They ain't got nothing to lose. When I talk to them about that, and these are men, they're like, the only thing another man can use against us, if they can't beat us in strength, they use our women against us, right? That is the only leg up that they can do and use. And it makes sense that that is your only weak spot is, the women. And I think ultimately one of the reasons, and they may have said this in the text, that Currency were using these women because he knew that in some way, if Teray had a little bit more time to learn, he would be able to defeat him. And we do see him defeat him. But he was doing that to goad him into death, right? To goad him into that war.
But Currency telling Teray to tell Amber to come to him, to come and lay with him, that was definitely a flex.
A humiliation ritual in a way. Like, tell her to come. And it's that same logic that Doro had. And he said, like, either you tell Anyanwu, either you tell your people to come, or I'll use your mouth to tell them. Which you want? Not to get back on Doro, but I'm just saying.
Okay, because I was getting ready to light it up.
No, we talking about signifying, so I'm trying to.
I'm gonna hold it in.
But I think what ultimately got Currency killed was his drive for power blinded him, right? And usually, and just to throw back to what Ebony pointed out, they were within this medieval system, right? And usually in the medieval stories, the person that gets power is the one who never wanted it in the first place and is able to relate more to the people on the ground and see more things that's happening than the person who's fighting to have the power, because their focus is narrow, right? Than the person who doesn't want it. And that's why Currency ended up, dying in the end.
And that is also why Rael said, I never chose him. He chose himself. Right. So that whole time people were under the impression that, oh, yes, this is the next heir apparent. This is the because, they're blood brothers. Excuse me. And everyone was assuming that naturally Currency was going to succeed Rael. And Rael literally tells Teray, no, I never chose him. So you are ultimately always the choice. But you weren't ready. You had to learn some things. You had to grow up really quickly because he was on his way to glory due to the Clayark fight.
And talk about signifying with Rael, because if that's not a black daddy, I don't know what he is, because like he was that tough love when T-Ray was like literally on his knees begging, like, please, like, will you give me shelter? And he was like, no, you failed the test. Like, you are not worthy. Like, get out of my sight. And then at the end for him to be like, I knew you could do it all along, son. Like, are you so serious right now?
Dead serious. But he had to prove himself, right? I feel like even the journey, like as you mentioned, like we're on this hero's journey. He had to make it to that point of proving and overcoming and defeating his enemies. And I don't think he could have, if he would have been given help, it would have disqualified him. And then people would have tried to compete with him for the pattern, right? Again. And I think What'd you say?
Y'all said, I was waiting for you to get here. I'm tired. Like, hurry up and get here already.
Yeah, he was tired. Because I think he had to be fair, right? As the pattern master, whoever naturally makes it, that is the person. These are his two sons. And so I always joke with my mom that I'm the favorite. She'll never admit it. I'm the favorite. There are 5 of us. But you can't choose between your kids. You have to, even though you may want to, privately, you have to like publicly, I love everyone equally. You know what I'm saying? At least the Black parents I've seen do that, and the parents I've seen do that. Not everyone does that, but I don't think he could have said it out of his mouth or even thunk it in a way that would have tilted that duel, right? You had to be fair. And whoever won. And I think that's also that coldness, like when we're thinking about it, let's not forget that even in Mind of My Mind, they could not tolerate their children. So he does not even have the emotional connection to his children because the patternists cannot tolerate them. That's why they're in the schools in the first place. Y'all remember that? And the only person who had that kind of emotional care was the wife, who was taken out in the beginning of the text, but even she was not at the schools like that. She was seeing, or interacting with them through mute memories. She was not in direct contact with them in that way either. So I think that distance can be, because they could not still tolerate their kids. Maisha?
I think that may be a nod to question number 1 that you wrote about Black trauma and the lack of connection that the patternist had to their kids, and at least emotional connection that you wrote about, the question that you asked rather, because doing the work that I'm doing, it seems to be a lack of emotional connection between a lot of people in our community with their family, or a lack of understanding or emotional depth or emotional maturity. And I definitely think that's a nod to some of the trauma that we experience during our ancestors' enslavement to now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the question that Maisha is referring to, it says, in a 1990 interview, Butler remarked that the patternists were really awful and suggested that their moral decline could be read as commentary on Black America shaped by poor leadership. In what ways does Patternmaster function as an allegorical critique of systems within Black American life? And how might Butler be reflecting on generational trauma, institutional failure, or intra-communal stratification through the patternist hierarchy? Y'all want to go there? Because the patternists are dysfunctional. They are. They don't tolerate their children. They have a disregard for other people in a lot of ways. They're self-serving, self-seeking. They only care about getting to the top. It's kind of like a crabs in the barrel type of situation. Even now that we see that you can still be a patternist, but if you're not close in the pattern to the pattern master, it don't even matter. You're kind of outside or ousted in a way. And so how do y'all think that Butler is critiquing some of the systems within Black American life, or reflecting on generational trauma, institutional failure, or intra-communal stratification? Such a difficult topic to grapple with. Okay, somebody was going, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I think that one of the things about this, that it reminded me of, you're building a society or a hierarchy based on others' interpretation of what that should look like. And that's what that was. So she's building, or Mary, or from what Doro was trying to do, you're taking, as Sir Maximus said, you're taking basically the fruit from a dysfunctional person, which is Doro, and then you're building a society, because all the rules or all the things they're talking about, what has to be, is exactly him. The closer you are to him, like he did not care about his children. He had some things like that, but he didn't think twice about sleeping with any of them. He didn't think twice about killing any of them if they had to. Like he keeps some of them around, but not really. It was one of those things where everybody was disposable as long as he was on top.
So I'm wondering, Tina, to your point, you said something that made me think, is it, if the father does not care, then the system is messed up here. The family structure is faulty. If the father does not model this type of, or lay this type of foundation, then the whole family that is built upon, this faulty foundation will eventually fall and crumble because it cannot stand. So do y'all think it's the father thing, because you mentioned Doro and he is arguably their progenitor, or is it just the unit itself?
I think it's a little bit of both, because it is at some point this hierarchy that exists within humans, and the way that is, when you talk about like in different societies, is there a hierarchy that is so oppressive, or is there a hierarchy that is more communal? And the hierarchy that gets perpetuated is the one that is brutal. Whereas like there's got to be somebody on the bottom. They have to be treated as worthless. They have to be in this scenario. That's the structure that Doro embraced and then made for his people. And then that's what you see here in the Patternmaster, because there are hierarchies where maybe there's a king or whatever else, but everything is more equal, or they're more communal, or people are still taken care of. They feel appreciated. That's not what this is.
Yeah.
That didn't
Sure if
happen.
this outcome is what Mary had in mind. It's what Doro had in mind, and
Yes.
it's what happened when men have taken over. But I'm not sure if that's what Mary had intention. It talks a lot about the Patternmasters or even the Housemasters having all these wives, and then you have the apprentices, and then you have the outsiders. That really wasn't what was going on when Mary was in charge of the pattern. It didn't really talk about Mary having any other husbands or children by anybody else besides her one husband. I can't remember his name at the time. But
Carl.
I'm wondering if the pattern stayed within a woman's hands, would it look the same as it does in the Patternmaster?
Well, so that I don't know, because because there is that big of a leap, right? So the patternists were just becoming a thing in mind of my mind, and we only know of one child from that narrative, which was August, I think was his name, with Carl. But we don't know if they went on to have more children, or if August succeeded Mary and learned all the things that she put in place, because it wasn't what she had in mind of my mind as a budding patternist, but it doesn't mean that she didn't morph into this other Doro-like figure. Because remember, even Butler said that she is what Doro should have been had he survived transition, right? And so we don't know if August took over the pattern after Mary passed, or if she had another kid and they dueled forward. But these patternists are her lineage, right? From what I understand and from the notes. So maybe it wasn't from what we can read what she had in mind, but we're thousands of years or hundreds of years in advance, so I don't even know, to be honest. And we don't even see him leading, because I think that when we meet Rael, it said he had been neglecting his work for a long time. Once he, gets pew-pewed by the clay arc. So what was it, 20 years? I think he said he was waiting 20 years, right? For Teray.
He said 15, but he said
Okay.
he waited
Okay.
for 15 years longer.
Okay. Because he was ready to go when he got taken out, right?
Yeah.
He was ready to go, and Teray wasn't ready, so he had to wait extra years. So of course now we have this, no one's really progressing, because the pattern master, who is taking small amounts of energy from everyone, is not progressing the pattern, because he's just trying to keep himself alive until a successor is ready. So I really don't know.
I think also, like, sometimes we have to be careful about, like, thinking that a different identity in a position of power is going to be better, because if they don't have a different ideological framework to lead from, there isn't going to be change, right? So like you can still have war in heels. And
Yeah,
like
I think Mary was horrible. I do. I think she was horrible. A budding, horrific walking nightmare. That's what I think. But I maybe don't know who think that. Yeah, because we don't know, because she was the controller of the pattern, and we already know she had those proprietary thoughts. Like there were so many clues, I think, from Mind in My Mind as I think back down, that Butler was kind of pointing to the fact that Mary is not to be let off the hook. And she also said that, women were often underestimated, right? And while we had the coming of age story of Mary, we don't know mature Mary at all, right? She could have really been the Devil Wears Prada.
But initially, Mary had started the pattern under the guise of she was helping people transition who had.
Oh, go ahead. You cut out. Uh-oh, you went out, Ebony.
I'm sorry. Mary had started the pattern.
No. What's happening? You so distant. We can't.
You can't hear me?
There you go. There you go.
She started the pattern under the guise of her helping people, helping
Yeah.
those people that were close to transition but never really did, and that
Yeah.
were suffering because they could not transition, that
Yeah.
she was helping those.
Yeah. But also remember that they were memories, and giving them new memories in the text when they were going into their transitional homes. They were still conditioning mutes, people who don't have those mental sensitivities. Like they were starting to do some of it, but I think it was the packaging. We're going to, and this is what I think I said in one of the articles, or maybe it's the article that I stopped writing on Mind in My Mind, that Butler, a lot of this stuff is horrible, but Butler doesn't pause long enough for you to reflect on it before she throws something great in your face again, right? So to your point, Ebony, she's healing, she's teaching the telepaths, about themselves. She is bringing them out of horrible situations. She's helping them build this community and build their lives. But then there are these moments or these slippages where we start to see, that's at the expense of this person, or you all can do this more, you all can do this better because now you have this hive mind. And so now you can oppress people even the more. So I also think, like, even when we're thinking about Jules and Survivor and how they reflect on the pattern in society, I think though it didn't start off as that, of course, eventually it's going to become corrupt the bigger it gets, and so while it may not have started that way, it could have ended that way.
She definitely gave, after she went through her transition and she realized she was pulling these people, and then she realized that whatever she was doing, because she was taking lessons from Doro, and then she realized I need to get rid of Doro so so he's not going to try to kill me or whatever else. Her like taking his thinking pattern became all encompassing. Like even the fact that she, without telling Emmy at the time, because she was calling herself Emma, she was calling herself that during this time, she marked her so that everybody in the pattern would know who she was and all this. So she was definitely out of pocket, and she was not someone who was like being communal. She was being controlling. Like, this is what I want you to do. You're gonna teach. You're gonna do this. Like, she didn't give them options. There was no option.
Huh?
I agree.
Yeah, she didn't give them any options. So I think that there was, but she was like this even before she made the transition. Like some of the stuff that she would say to her mother and to everybody else that were doing sacrifice, like she was not a sympathetic person to others around her at all. She didn't listen when they told her, hey, you may not want to call Doro daddy because something gonna happen later on. She was like, she was not someone who was like Emma was. She was not someone who was willing to take on others and truly help them in like their own autonomy. That was never her.
Okay, so I think we can agree that there were good elements and then there were just bad elements. And now when we finally get to Patternmaster, we just see it is all blown up in some way that we just did not anticipate. However, we have made it through an entire series. And if this is your first time making it through someone's series, give yourselves a round of applause, because it's not easy to keep this type of stamina up. It's really not. It's very difficult. And so I want to congratulate everyone who's still with us, thinking through these books and reading these books. Give yourselves a hand. And some people, I got some emails that say, I haven't read a book, and I said I want to read more books, and now I'm reading along with y'all. You know what I'm saying? And so I'm so excited to have you all along on the journey with me. Just a quick announcement or reminder, because we're done here. No class next week. I'm not abandoning y'all. It's just no class next week. We on spring break. But when we come back on April 30th, we are diving into the Parable series. And so we're only reading up to chapter 14. So complete chapter 14. And then we'll jump back in. Be sure to check the Substack. I know you get the email notifications. I will start publishing archival stuff from the Parable series. I think that's the most of the archive I do have is the Parable series, because that's the series I'm not the strongest in. And so I have a lot to share with you all from what Butler was writing, her thoughts, her characters, her sketches, things of that nature. So do be sure to check the Substack, both paid and free version. Because we're going to continue the momentum over there. If TikTok goes away, I don't think it'll go away by April 30th, but if it does, I will drop a Zoom link on the Substack, just like I dropped the link in the chat on the Substack about, to this. If it does for some reason go down, you can count on, I have a paid version of Zoom. You can count on me dropping the link, and we'll conduct this via Zoom. And then I will upload the replay to the Octavia Butler mixtape course on YouTube. But do y'all have any closing remarks? Anything y'all want to share before we hop off? We're out of time.
Closing remarks. One thing. I was looking through all the different works and books of Octavia Butler, and you've mentioned most of them. But when I looked on Amazon, I found one called Bloodchild and Other Short Stories. Do you know about the short stories that she wrote and the essays?
Yeah, let me grab the book. 1 second, y'all. All right. So this is the book Ebony's referring to, Bloodchild and Other Stories. So you can find her essays online. You can find all of these short stories online. Bloodchild, which is the one that's in anthologies now, that's her pregnant man story. It's not the greatest to me. It's really weird, but it is about aliens impregnated a man so they can save the human women for reproduction. Anyway, you want to read that? You can read that. Even the evening and the morning and the night is my favorite. I do have a medical humanities article written on that I can drop on a Substack if we read her short stories. It deals with what happens when cancer patients think that they're taking a cure for cancer, but the government actually gives them something else, which ultimately causes their offspring to be born with genetic disease that causes them to try to dig themselves out of their bodies. And of course, they're institutionalized. So that's the evening and the morning and the night. We have Near of Kin. We have Speech Sounds. I don't remember Near of Kin. Speech Sounds deals with what happens when a pandemic hits society and no one can speak the same language. So some people have verbal communicate ability. Some people have drawing capabilities. Like no one is speaking the same language. And the short story is trying to figure out, how will you survive when no one is speaking the same language? That's a thing. I don't remember crossover. Oh, it's dealing with health. I have some notes right there. It's dealing with health. And then her 2 essays you can find online, Positive Obsession and Furior Scribendi. She does have the Book of Martha, which is so easy to read. If you like the Parable series, you're going to like the Book of Martha. Of course, religious undertones, but deals with a Black woman trying to decolonize her mind from images of what God is and who he is. And then there's a short story called Amnesty. Deals with AI. So on here. So I am, I'm aware of it. I think that if we do get to this, if we get to that, I would be proud of us for real. I think that we would probably touch the short stories after the series writings, because then there's another book, Fledgling, which is her vampire novel. I have an article on that too, that is not part of the series. So yes, I am aware of them. They are easier to digest than the books, but they're all in this text. But you can find majority of them online. So if you don't want to buy a physical copy, I feel like you can find these online. And then there are the unexpected stories of Octavia Butler that were posthumously published. In a lot of ways, they were the beginning short stories of her beginning to work out Survivor. So in a short story form, she does complete Survivor in a way, right? And then there is another text. It kind of gives you, what does it give you? I think these books are, the unexpected stories are ebook. It's an ebook. The other text kind of gives you Mind of My Mind vibes, but from someone who is not a patternist, but she's a Black woman caregiver trying to protect kids from the system, from stealing them and using them for other reasons. Go figure. So, yeah. So what was your question, Ebony? I'm sorry. Did you want to just know, was I aware of them?
I wanted to read it. I want to add it to the syllabus.
Oh, not you making requests.
Quest.
Y'all are funny to me. Look, if we make it through, we make it through. We have, how many weeks are we in the Parable of Talent? 1, 2, 3. We got 5 weeks of the Parable series itself. I did break up Parable of the Talents over 3 weeks because it is a heavier lift. I know that for sure that it's a heavier lift. So we're doing Parable of the Soul over 2 weeks, but Parable of the Talents over 3 weeks. And so we'll get to it, y'all. If y'all want to stick around, we can. If y'all want to say, I read everything Butler has written, we can definitely do that. I have no problem with that. Bree Smith says, didn't she write Lilith's Brood? Yes. So Lilith's Brood is formerly known as the Xenogenesis trilogy, including Dawn, Adulthood Rights, and Imago. So that series comes right after the series we're about to start on the week after next. Y'all say ain't nobody going nowhere. All right, y'all. Well, look, I will see y'all on April 30th. We will be reading the first half of the Parable of the Sower. And I look forward to chatting with you all about it. Hide your kids, hide your wife, and clutch your pearls as we jump into this series. Do anybody else got anything? No? All right. Well, good night, y'all. Have a good one. I'll see y'all on the 30th. Bye.